This week, I'm talking to Ben Inskeep, the program director at Citizens Action Coalition, the oldest consumer protections nonprofit here in Indiana. I've been following Ben on Twitter for quite some time and love continually hearing from someone who has a lot of in-depth knowledge about data centers and someone who rails so deeply against them. I had a great time chatting and hope you enjoy what he has to say. If you would like to rail against data centers yourself, keep an ear out for local opportunities to do so. And if you are listening, on Monday, July 13th, the day of release, there is a hearing at the City County Building downtown, 200 East Washington Street at 5:30 p.m. Show up, wear red, and share your testimony. And if you're interested in supporting Third Space Indy, you can do so by going to support.thirdspaceindy.com, where you can toss a couple of coins my way, or you can do something as simple as leaving a review on your preferred podcasting platform or giving a like or subscribe on YouTube. Thanks so much as always for watching, and on to the show.
Scared rabbit, they've got you boxed in. Old habit, you draw the curtain. Lonely only if they ever leave.
Hello, my name is Michael Zarek, and this is Third Space Indy. In 1989, a man named Ray Oldenburg wrote a book called The Great Good Place. And in this book, he coined the term the third place. This describes somewhere that is outside of your home and outside of your work that you can go be with others and build community. So I've made it my goal to find people all over Indianapolis, and today in Lawrence, which is still Indianapolis, find people all over who are doing this type of work to build the community in whatever way they can. Which brings me to today's guest, who is somebody I've been following on Twitter for quite some time. He gets me riled up, and I think he gets himself riled up over the current fight against AI and data centers here in Indianapolis. Today, my guest is Ben Inskeep, who's the program director of the Citizens Action Coalition, which is the oldest the oldest consumer advocacy group in Indiana, not in the country. Right?
That's right. No,
Okay.
yeah.
How you doing?
Doing well. Thanks so much for having me today.
Absolutely.
It's great to be on your show.
So for anyone who may not know who you are, which I assume is quite a few people, let the people know who you are and what you do, what you're about, and then maybe transition into what CAC is.
Sure. So I'm Ben. I'm from Indianapolis. I consider myself a Hoosier through and through. Work at a great organization, consumer and environmental, Indiana-based nonprofit, Citizens Action Coalition, where we are a utility watchdog. We take on some of the biggest and most powerful corporations that are threatening our environment, raising the cost of living, and undermining our democracy. So our work is a pretty big task, but it's really important stuff, and it brings us out into communities, talking with Hoosiers, and it's really empowering to see the ability of Hoosiers when they organize, making their voices heard. So that's taken us in a number of different areas. Most notably, recently, we are very vocal about our opposition to some of the very large data centers coming to Indiana. But we've also had a long history of doing things like fighting rate hikes in the electric utility and natural gas space as well.
Okay, cool. I did have questions about that, but I'm glad you answered, because right now would you say that you're being consumed by your work against data centers?
I would say that's taken over a big part of our work. We still do have our standard bread and butter issues. We're still intervening in rate cases, opposing large rate increases. We're still fighting traditional environmental harms like coal ash pollution that is prominent in Indiana that's getting into our waterways. So there's still those issues, but now we have layered on another big issue that also demands increasing amounts of our attention.
Yeah, I'm sure that has complicated things.
Yes.
So what does a program director do in the context of your life when you are doing advocacy in the context of CAC? Are you the main communicator of ideas, working on the sort of advocacy side, getting people, as I said, riled up, or are you doing something else?
It's a position where you wear many different hats, I would say. Yeah, and on any given day, it's going to be different than the day before. It could mean talking to journalists and media folks, helping educate them and helping them with stories to spread information to Hoosiers. It could mean going out in the community, giving a presentation, leading a town hall, It can mean reading and analyzing really complicated filings by electric utilities and drafting written expert witness testimony that's going to go in front of the commission, where you have to be very thoughtful and careful about what you say, because you can be cross-examined on the witness stand by these high-priced utility lawyers. Mm-hmm. So it involves a number of different areas, but it's all about getting information and education out to the communities, helping them get organized, and then helping them stand up for themselves through things like expert witness testimony, where we're bringing a lot of facts, evidence, analysis to support our arguments and recommendations.
Mm. So I listened to a podcast yesterday on the original Luddites. So not the pejorative Luddite, which came from this, but someone suggested me this podcast that was sort of history focused about the original Luddites, which were people who destroyed machines during the initial industrial era as a way of advocating for their own labor rights, because they saw that the people who own these factories, who were implementing these machines, were totally disregarding the workers, firing them, reducing their workforce, automating systems, and all for the sake of their own profits. And in many cases, also, the output of the machines was less. The example used was socks. The quality of the socks dropped substantially. And when I listened to this podcast, so many of these themes echoed with me in terms of what we are facing at this moment, which is, to me, that the conversation around artificial intelligence and data centers is a conversation of labor and human rights, as opposed to a conversation around just how much business it will bring in. Because my personal opinion is that if artists could sustain themselves, if workers were properly compensated, and if the environment was safe, we had invested in sustainable energy 15 years ago or something, it wouldn't even be a conversation that we're thinking on. Do you have any thoughts on any of that?
I think the Luddite example is actually a perfect analogy to the time we're in right now. I'm in the middle of reading Brian Merchant's excellent book on this very topic, Blood and the Machine. So I encourage folks to check that out and get the full history of the Luddite movement, because there's a lot of misconceptions I had about it, because that's turned into a pejorative term, when really it is about people organizing and standing up to those who control the means of production, those who have the technology and are using it for their benefit, at the detriment of labor and the people working in the factories, the people that are struggling to make ends meet. So I feel like AI is kind of a good example of this very situation, where we have the folks who are building these AI models are just very transparently taking people's labor. They're taking data that they have not purchased, that they don't have a right to use, and they're training their models on it without compensating the creators. And then they're using the models they create to then replace labor, and they're owning the models themselves. They're fencing off who can use them under what conditions, who benefits from them in terms of the ownership. So there's, I think, a lot of interesting analogies there that track. And at the end of the day, a lot of the concerns we're seeing in Hoosier communities about this technology does boil down to, how is it going to be used, who's going to benefit, and again, who are going to be the losers of this technology and the ownership of it.
Yeah. I'd like to break down almost the individual issues, if we could, with data centers. So the thing that rings true most deeply with me is the impact on the environment. I think in a lot of cases that might not ring true with the most people, but in the past week we've seen what I would consider very intimidating storms, where we're having, quote unquote, an outbreak of tornadoes, which is not ever a word you want to hear.
No.
So when you talk about the impact on the environment, how much of the conversation around energy usage and water usage, and then water pollution as a result, as well as sort of, the conversation around the data center going in Martindale, Brightwood, sort of polluting the land, having a long-term effect, in the same way that cities built canals 60 plus years ago, and those are all sort of defunct, and we are lucky to have the current canal, even though it almost bankrupted our city, ? So maybe talk about like the truth of, as far as you know, in terms of environmental impact.
Yeah, I think the challenge with data centers in conveying the harm to the public is it's like a whole new order of magnitude, a whole different scale than we're used to with large commercial or industrial projects. These data centers can use literally an order of magnitude more power or electricity than the next largest user of electricity in a utility service territory, which is considerable because in Indiana, we have a lot of heavy manufacturing and industry. We have a lot of big energy users in our state already. We have some of the largest steel mills in the country, the largest inland refinery in North America. We have some of these, old aluminum smelters. So we have some very large users, but to have a data center come in that's 10 times bigger in terms of power consumption is pretty eye-opening, because that means then the associated environmental impacts are also going to be of a similarly large magnitude. For energy, we're talking about the equivalent of an entire city's worth of electricity consumption from just one large data center. And as a result, it means our utilities are either A, not retiring their really polluting coal-fired power plants, or B, a lot of them are now expanding or building out new natural gas-fired power plants. So doubling down on our fossil fuel infrastructure that has, not only impacts on our climate, but also, detrimental impacts to our water quality, water consumption usage, negative air quality impacts, and so on. So there's a tremendous amount of impacts from these data centers. And that's why we got so concerned when we did the math and we calculated these impacts. It was truly eye-opening. It's like, oh, wait, this isn't just a new user that we can just kind of mitigate some of the damages. We need to actually slow down or stop some of this growth because it's unsustainable. We can't meet it at the scale and timing that they're demanding.
There's I don't know exact locations, but there are places in the western United States that have already faced power outages because of their data center consumption, right?
I think
is that conjecture?
There is concern about it happening in the future. I don't know that we've witnessed it directly today, other than we have had some stability issues on the grid where data centers shut off power consumption very rapidly when there was a small fault on the power system. And most power users would just continue to ride through that fault, but the data centers shut off power so suddenly it led to stability issues on the grid. It didn't lead to power outages, but it did make reliability experts very worried about the impacts as we build more and more of these things. One, you create potential impacts to the stability, just the hour by hour, minute by minute stability of the grid. But then to your point, they use so much energy and they're coming online so fast. The concern is in the future, you could get a situation where there's just not enough power to go around. And when that happens, who's going to have their power shut off first? Is it going to be households? Is it going to be the data centers? That's TBD.
Yeah.
But a huge concern because when residences lose power, it kills people. I mean, that's the basic math of it. When we saw, for example, down in Texas in 2021 with their major storm that led to power outages for some households nearly a week down there, we saw hundreds of people die either as a result of not having heat during the middle of the winter or from having backup diesel generators that ran but weren't properly ventilated, leading to carbon monoxide poisoning.
Or even
so it's really important. Medical devices,
things like that.
A lot of households need to have their medicine stored in refrigerators or use oxygen machines. People don't necessarily think about all these implications of having reliable power and what happens when you don't. So it does matter, and it can be a life or death issue for many people.
So on the way up here, I had about a 25-minute drive. So I had a moment to listen to part of the town hall that you did, I think, late last year. And there was a stat that really stuck out to me, which was that in terms of number of jobs per megawatt or something like that. And you cited a stat that was like it was sort of a generalized other industries, saying that on average, these generate one person per less than 1 megawatt, whereas for data centers it's like 45 or some number in that range.
For other industries.
So one job for 45 megawatts, so the difference was like 100x. So saying that for power consumption in terms of job creation, connecting the sort of environmental impact to even an economic impact for an individual community is null in a lot of ways.
That's right. Yeah. And people think we're just opposed to economic development, and the opposite's the case. We think data centers are going to be challenging and undermining future economic development because, like you're saying, they use so much power and they have so little return in terms of the job creation, permanent job creation that results from it, that when a data center comes to a location, it can then take years before the utility can accommodate any sort of additional economic development or growth, because the data centers come in and gobbled up all of that spare capacity, all that resource consumption that they demand.
Yeah.
So not only do you have situations where, yes, other industry could provide 100x or more in terms of jobs per megawatt of power consumption, but you also have situations where some utilities are saying, we're kind of closed for new business. We can't accommodate a new large industrial manufacturer for the next 5 to 10 years because we need to make some very serious additional electric system upgrades to have that type of large user come, because we had a data center come and take up all of that system capacity, so we don't have anything spare left over.
Yeah. From a more, I guess, emotional standpoint, it seems like a lot of, well, we talk about the stealing of data in the terms of sustainability of being an artist or a writer or something like that. What are CAC's concerns, or even just your concerns, about the way AI is being used going forward from a pure business action standpoint, I guess? Because there's a ruling, as far as I understand, that says you cannot copyright an AI generated image. So if I were to start a business and I make a logo for myself, someone else could theoretically just take that logo and say, this is mine, because there's no copyright ability. You already see it. There's a new Instagram account. It's called the Indy AI Watchdog. That's just sort of collating all this data of a variety of businesses around town who are putting out posters, who are putting out now hiring, just anything that's like, hey, we're doing this thing, but it's all AI generated, and they all look the same in terms of the sort of quote unquote slopification of things. What do you think of AI in terms of like business output or individual artist output?
Yeah, we have a lot of concerns, I would say, about these applications of AI. So it's not just the underlying data center impacts that create cause for concern, but also, like you're saying, the AI itself, the technology applications can be really harmful. So yes, it creates slop, so low quality content that's, again, based off of stealing other people's creative works. But it can also be wrong information. AI hallucination is endemic. It's part of this technology. It's not something that can be solved or taken away. It's always going to be there. So you always have the risk when you're using AI applications that it's just making up things.
Yeah.
So I've had that happen when I've tried to use it in work applications to test it out myself. It gives me a lot of wrong information all the time, sends me down just wildly incorrect paths. And then you look at the way its users have been negatively impacted by AI. So there's a reason why Copilot and these other AI applications say in their terms of use that this is for entertainment purposes only.
Oh,
even
that's real?
They literally say
I did not know that.
Even though they're pitching it to enterprises, businesses spend, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars on this technology for your work. The terms of service say don't rely on this for your business because it could be wrong, could have negative impacts there. So I think, we have a lot of concerns then about how it could be used, the negative impacts, and then I would say the psychology of it too has been negatively harming people. We see how it's been used by teenagers to commit suicide. We see how it's led to AI psychosis, where it's the ability of AI to mimic human communication tricks people into thinking that it's not just a machine, it's not just computer code, but it's some sort of supernatural or super intelligence that is actually thinking when it's not doing that. It's not thinking, it doesn't know anything, it doesn't have feelings, but it can trick humans very quickly because you get into a pattern where it's mimicking conversation.
There is a video, sorry, it just came to me. There's a YouTuber, his name is Eddie Burback, and he does these sort of absurdist videos, but he did a test where, and he kind of fed it some seed stuff to get it going a little bit, but talking about how he felt like he couldn't trust his like family and friends, and then it started to go down this cycle. He was like, oh, I'm just going to do this test where I just like listen to the AI and do what it says I do. So he like ends up like moving to this isolated location, and I have no better word than communing with a large rock and drinking like baby formula or something. Like, it's a super absurd, almost comedy video, but the harms of the way he was interacting with AI, if you find someone at the wrong point in their life who is taking it too seriously, were very clear and dark. The other thing that I think often gets people's attention is that AI at this time is being used for CSAM production, which stands for child sexual abuse material. And a lot of people don't even consider that level of stuff where it's harming children. It's also being used to remove women's clothing and things like that. And just in terms of actual human harm outside of just the emotional, like, I don't like people generating posters.
Oh yeah, exactly. It has all these different harmful applications. I think the mass production of these really disturbing images by Grok in particular, we saw earlier this year, was horrifying in the just refusal of our institutions, our government, to do anything about it to protect the people that are being abused by this horrific content. Should also concern people. So I think it's not just the big tech companies that I'm disturbed by, but I've also been disturbed by the reaction from our institutions, whether it be the government or the media or some of these other establishments that you would think would be raising the alarm and doing something about this, but haven't been. And
I have a question: is it the reaction or the lack thereof?
Yeah, right. It's both, right? You're disturbed by the content itself, and that a company has the audacity to create something like this and not have the appropriate protections in place. But then I think it's equally horrifying to see our society doesn't have any sort of institutions in place that will protect us against entities of this size. And I think that kind of underlines our concern with having these multi-trillion-dollar corporations that are in control of this technology, that are too big to regulate, too big to fail, that are increasingly looking for government subsidies and bailouts, and that are being used for really, really harmful purposes that are obviously undermining individual rights, but also are what we want for society in general, I would say. I would argue.
Yeah. Are there effective uses of AI that we've seen? I know that obviously we've had a lot of conversation around AI imaging in healthcare in terms of identifying tumorous cells and things like that. A lot of the arguments being made about being pro AI are, it's here, it's not going away, or here's a list of things that it is helpful for. What are your opinions on that side of it?
I think it's a very fair question, because I think there are some useful applications of large language models, generative AI, as the concept has been discussed and approached. But I don't think there's a multi-trillion-dollar business opportunity there. I don't think there's a justification for large big tech companies spending hundreds of billions of dollars every year on new capital expenditures, data centers to build these things. I think there's a huge bubble being pushed by a narrative, a story created about it, about the possibility of super intelligence, about just overselling this technology. Yeah. So I think obviously there are some useful applications, but is it gonna fundamentally change everything in society? No. Is it gonna make everybody filthy rich? No. So I feel like there's the way it's being described, it has completely lost touch with reality. And then for the useful applications, I think there are actually ways to get the benefits without some of the large scale harms of these massive data centers. So there are smaller models that don't use the same large, trillion parameter plus kind of models, or that can be run locally on a computer as opposed to through the cloud, through the data centers. And there's maybe just a tailoring of the applications. Right now, we're not seeing these large big tech companies charge customers for the true cost of using their data center facilities. So right now, we're all being subsidized in our AI use. Once consumers start having to pay the actual price of these things, I think we're going to see, oh wait, maybe this technology is too expensive to use in a lot of applications are just the payoff isn't worth the price. So I think we're going to see that as these big tech companies realize we're just burning cash. We're not making money. We're losing billions of dollars every year. We need to start charging appropriate prices.
Yeah.
And so I think we're going to see that crystallize a bit more in the year to come.
Yeah. I've seen people like Wildstyle Pichelle posting about his personal use of AI on you mentioned like a local running of it. What's the word? Help.
Like a local server or computer. Like
yeah, basically like downloaded the Model 2 his computer and
exactly.
he's running it locally. And he's like, after I've tried this, he goes, I don't see how data centers are even a feasible thing. Like he goes, this thing is doing the work better and it's having the same sort of effect. And he's just sort of doing what you do, which is more very investigative.
Exactly. These things are not just, these, there's other ways to do it. And I think it's also important to know that, the AI branding is a branding exercise. There are other types of advanced computing, like machine learning and other types of potential artificial intelligence applications that aren't just relying on large language models that are gobbling up just the biggest data sets you can imagine, that are more tailored to specific applications, rather than having kind of a general purpose model that is much more computer intensive. So I would just say, I'm not against the advance of science and technology. I just think we also need to be critical thinkers about what are the applications it's being used for. Is it commensurate with how it's being described? And are there ways to mitigate some of those impacts to have the benefits without some of these drawbacks?
Yeah, there's something I've repeated to my wife a number of times, which is that there's been studies done by economists that are like, if we continued down the path we're going right now without any change, the economy just like will collapse because we are laying off thousands of workers at a variety of tech companies or beyond for the sake of efficiency. But when you remove workers from the system, you remove spending power in our current economy. And if no one can spend any money, then it will just collapse on itself. Like that's just how it works. That's basic math, I think.
Yeah,
basic
one of the fundamental.
I don't know, but someone knows it.
I think it's one of the fundamental contradictions of this AI race. You're right. As it's replacing workers, there's fewer people left to pay for its services and use it. So yeah, I think it does highlight that kind of an issue.
Mm-hmm. The other thing. Oh, I guess this is also a question I have that I've been thinking a lot about. So I brought up the Indie AI Watchdog. That's so hard to say. And they're highlighting individual small businesses or individuals around town using AI posters or whatever. What is the impact an individual is having? Is an individual using AI to generate posters regularly having an impact where them being highlighted in that way is reasonable? Like, is the individual user having such an impact that they should be ostracized or anything like that for having a negative impact on their community? Or is it just sort of like the show up to vote mentality where it's like the more people that do it, like your individual impact collectively is having that impact?
It's a fair question. I think part of the pushback is more tailored to taking away that social license of using AI by when you criticize examples of it on your day-to-day life in your making fun of, or you're, putting negative publicity on the folks that are using it for their businesses. I think you're helping to reduce that social license and reduce the use of it by peer pressure, if you will, social pressure. Yeah, certainly there's an impact when you use these tools because they are so energy and water intensive. There is an underlying impact you're making. It can be very hard to calculate that or determine that. I'm a big proponent of not necessarily over individualizing these problems, like criticizing somebody for their individual carbon footprint, for example, but then failing to emphasize the importance of broader action because our individual actions alone aren't going to be able to solve our social problems that we have. We need to change our system in order to fix these problems. So, I would say that's an issue I would say can be challenging because you're right. Your individual impact might not be itself major or significant from you're completely destroying a community by you, one person, using it. But I still do think it's worthwhile to avoid using it as a person, to call out those that do, to encourage them to use other tools or methods to achieve the same goal. Because at the end of the day, this is, because it's a negative societal and environmental impact, I do think we want to discourage its use. And so I think that social feedback is a valuable way to reducing its proliferation and reducing its adoption, even if one individual's consumption isn't going to be like a make or break impact on a community.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thanks for answering.
I just maybe to further elaborate on my answer there on that, I'm thinking of like the communities in like Mississippi and outside of Memphis where the data centers are for Grok, the XAI AI application, that's on Twitter and that Elon Musk has put out. They are using these unpermitted gas turbines at the Colossus 1 and 2 data centers there that are sited in these historically black communities where they aren't meeting environmental regulations. And so I can say, I would feel bad if I used Grok at all, even once or twice, because I would know that every time I'm using it, it's having this direct negative, harmful impact on these specific communities that you can directly point to where it's just an environmental injustice happening. Of course, that's happening elsewhere with other models. I think this is just a very concrete, specific example you can directly point to illustrate, like, wow, you're contributing to this really significant harm to these communities that certainly don't deserve it and that are not having their voices heard, are not being respected. And the companies are just blatantly ignoring the law to site these data centers and their power infrastructure there.
Yeah. Do you think we'll be able to, we've already seen it, but how short of a timeline is it to see the negative outcomes of a data center? I'm going to use Martindale Brightwood just because that's sort of top of my mind. So if we were to build a data center in Martindale Brightwood, is it a year or is it 5 years until people notice and then we go, why did we do this?
The impacts can be felt immediately as soon as they start construction. One, you start having just the impacts of a large construction project, we can negatively impact a community. But two, we're seeing examples of harms happen during the construction phase of a data center. So one is the New Carlisle Amazon data center, where they had to de-water the land by pumping millions of gallons of water out of the land in order to build the foundations for their data center buildings. And that's led to negative impacts on that surrounding community, like wells running dry for nearby homes. Other examples would be one up in Michigan City, where Google's building a data center on an old industrial site that had environmental contamination. I think that's a good analogy to the Martindale Brightwood situation, where that data center would also be sited on a parcel of land that has old environmental contamination from past industrial use. And there, up at where Google's data center is they found soil that Google was moving around and putting into berms and shipping off site actually had some severe hazardous chemical contamination in it.
Love
that they weren't properly testing and remediating before disposing of it in the proper landfills. So we are seeing some of these impacts happen at an early stage during that construction process. It doesn't just have to be once they're operating, you feel impacts. It's actually during the construction, you start getting some of those impacts. Once it then switches to operating and becoming a operational data center, you have maybe a different set of impacts. The noise pollution is a big one. Continuous 24/7, 365 loud noises.
I've seen some of those videos. It's like a sound from hell, kind of.
It is. I wouldn't wish that on anybody to live next door to that. You would never be able to enjoy being outside again on your own property, opening your windows on a beautiful summer day. I just, it's a travesty that anybody has to live by that type of onslaught, that noise pollution onslaught.
Is there anything else you are thinking about in terms of data center fight right now that you want to share?
Yeah, one of the things I'm thinking about a lot is the transparency and accountability angle with data centers. They have not been very transparent at any stage of the process so far, whether that be a proposed data center they're considering siting in a community that communities don't find out about until the last minute, or whether it be just understanding the impacts of an operating data center where they have not been transparent about what's in their wastewater stream, how much electricity are they using, Where are they getting their power consumption from? And then the subsidy issue. These are some of the most heavily subsidized companies I've ever seen in Indiana history. And the scale of the subsidies is truly staggering. We just finally got the state of Indiana to release the first batch of information about how much the data centers are getting in subsidies. Already, $655 million has gone out the door in terms of reduced sales tax for data centers.
And that's just the start.
That's just what's happened in the past.
Yeah.
That's not what's going to happen over the next 50 years that they get this subsidy for. So we're talking tens of billions of dollars at the end of the day that Hoosiers are going to lose out on because we are subsidizing the wealthiest corporations in human history.
Mm-hmm. One thing I think a lot about is use the term onslaught.
Yeah.
Martindale, Brightwood, the community came together to push back heavily. But then there's a conversation happening in Irvington. There's the Leap District in Lebanon. There's XYZ, ABC things happening where because these companies have so much money, they can just keep poking the bear.
Yeah.
And it's up to the collective effort of the communities to push back, but that becomes extremely tiring and exhausting. What do you think the solution is to that? I would say effective legislation, but maybe that's reductive at a time where we may or may not be getting that.
No, I think that's actually a good point. We need legislation that's protective of all communities in Indiana because these fights are happening. They're popping up all over this place, and it is hard to fight one by one. Some of them, communities' voices are respected, and data centers' proposals are withdrawn or defeated. But in other communities, they're not being respected. And in Indianapolis, we've seen a turn. We stopped a Google data center last September, got that proposal withdrawn. But then since that point in time, we've had 3 data centers move forward, whether it be Martindale Brightwood, the Saby data center in Decatur Township on the south side, or a third data center. The Irvington one, the DC Blocks one that has gotten at least an initial thumbs up. It hasn't received the full approval yet, but so we're seeing kind of a lack of accountability and a lack of responsiveness by local government to listen to the constituents instead of just doing the bidding of large corporations and industry. And that's a big challenge because a lot of elected officials are not beholden to their constituents. They're beholden to industry and special interests. And I think the data center example is really highlighting that to a new extent for a lot of Hoosiers who maybe are waking up to this fact and realizing this issue. So what can we do about it? At the local level, we've been pushing for moratoriums, temporary pauses on additional data centers being permitted or allowing to be constructed in order to give local government the time to think through this issue, conduct their own studies or collect feedback from their constituents, and then adopt the appropriate policies or regulations to protect their communities. And, for example, that could mean data centers are allowed in certain areas, but not in other areas, or there's setbacks from residential areas to make sure their noise isn't going to negatively impact existing homeowners. There's other types of protections, like making sure they are using clean power instead of, building new fossil fuel powered power plants.
Yeah.
So there's a number of different ways you could craft local or state level policy to mitigate some of those harms. And then at the end of the day, I think a big thing we need to do is get rid of these subsidies. That's just adding insult to injury. We're accelerating our own destruction by throwing billions of dollars at these companies to come here. So we need to stop that spigot, turn that spigot off. So the first step, do no harm. First step when you're, digging a hole, is to stop digging so you can get out of the hole. And I think that's where we are at data centers is we need to stop these local and state level subsidies. We need to create those protections, and moratoria are a good first step or way to press pause on an avalanche of data center proposals facing communities in our state.
Yeah. There was Bernie Sanders just suggested a policy that was like make 50% of, I don't know if it's taxes or profits from data centers publicly owned. So then everyone in the US just gets paid like $1,000 a year or something from the data centers. Now, I will say, I think it's funnier than it is practical because I think it still legitimizes the building of these data centers. But I think it goes to show if you if you can implement a policy like that and taking 50% of their profit or whatever the term is after the 50%, and you're giving 350 million people $1,000 a year, like how much these people are making off of this stuff behind the scenes. And when we are giving them such deep subsidies, as you say, like how much they're robbing us in the most literal sense of the word.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate Senator Sanders raising these types of issues and suggesting kind of bold ideas. I do share some concerns with that specific proposal. One is these things are not making any money right now; they're losing billions of dollars.
Yep.
So, number one is there's no money to share with the public. Number two is I would certainly not want to create an incentive structure that would either result in taxpayer money going to these companies to building out more data centers or throwing them a bailout because they're losing so much money. So I would, be worried that about that. And then, also just we should be, this technology itself is, exploiting people, exploiting creatives, taking people's copyrighted or intellectual property and using it without their permission. And I think we shouldn't be encouraging that. We shouldn't be just sharing the profits of that. We should make sure the creatives that did that work themselves are being fairly compensated for their work as well.
Yeah. Bernie Sanders is old. He doesn't get it. So one last question on data centers, and then we'll shift gears just a little bit. Let's say I am a resident and I'm deeply concerned about this. What is something that I can do other than donate to Citizens Action Coalition? What is something that I can do to join the fight, if you will?
I think we need everybody involved in this fight one way or another. So there are many opportunities to get involved depending on what your interest and ability and time commitment ability is as well. So there's you can get involved in organizing your own community on data centers. So if there's a specific proposal in your community, that can mean knocking on doors, talking to your neighbors, sharing flyers and information, helping people turn out to your city or your city council meetings or your county council meetings where they're making decisions and where there's going to be opportunities to give public comment. You can contact your state and local elected officials. That's one that's super important. And people get tired of us saying that, but they need to hear from us because they're feeling the pressure in a way that local elected officials and state elected officials haven't on many issues in the past. But we need to keep that pressure because if we can continue to ratchet it up, we're going to force their hand to actually do something about it and protect citizens. Because right now, I think a lot of elected officials are looking at this issue pretty nervously, saying, wow, people are getting pretty upset about this issue. And they're kind of hemming and hawing about what the right response is. But we need to make sure that they respond in a way that's actually creating the policies that protects people, and then that they're not getting a free pass to ignore this issue or continue to doing things at the behest of the large big tech companies that are harming our communities.
Mm-hmm. I've seen so many clips of people who across the political spectrum, but I think of specifically people in like deep Texas who are historically deep red conservative, red-blooded American conservative, who are like, this is my one issue. And it's like, I will abandon all of my other things to rail against this one issue because it is so divisive. And it's also one-sided. Like, this is an 80-20 issue of like 80% of people oppose this data center conversation no matter where you are, and that is not common.
This is a unique and truly unifying issue because, like you're saying, we're working in communities across the state and people of all walks of life. We're talking about working, Martindale, Brightwood, a historic Black community here in Indianapolis, urban, but we're also involved in suburban and exurban communities on the outskirts of Indianapolis or the outskirts of cities. And then we're also in, deeply rural areas of the state where data centers are also being proposed. And so you're talking to people from all partisan persuasions, people that are completely apolitical and have never done any related work in their lives, and people that say, I don't want to talk about politics. I just want to talk about data centers. You're like, wait a second, this is a political issue. You're
hold on.
But people don't even think them, getting involved in a data center fight is necessarily them getting involved in politics. And you have to be, hold on a second. This is a deeply political issue.
Good gateway drug, I think.
It's exactly. It's a good way to broach that conversation and to start talking about a lot of these issues where people might not have put two and two together in the past, or might not have thought about things in a certain way, but then the data center issue is a good way to start those conversations about, okay, yeah, you got this water concern in your community. Oh, did you know about this other type of development that's using a lot of water? Or did you realize these regulations are actively being repealed right now at the federal level that are protecting your water? And so it creates an opportunity to have those conversations with people that from all walks of life that might not otherwise consider themselves an environmentalist or a consumer advocate or in line with you on many other policy or political issues. But then you start talking about data centers with them and you agree perfectly and you're singing Kumbaya together.
Yeah, their face turns a little red. They're like, so I am going to, sorry, I have to take a step back. There was a mayor in Indiana that said something really troubling about his constituents. Do you recall?
I believe you're maybe referring to the mayor of Shelbyville, who had
Yes.
some choice words about the quality of people's homes who were having the signs outside that says no data centers. I think he referred to them as, like shitty households or shitty yards or something about the upkeep of the house as being poor.
Yeah.
And the folks that are, against data centers being a lower class or working class people, which, I think a lot of people found very insulting and, very classist language about, just denigrating, working class Hoosiers who, have the audacity of standing up against their own exploitation. So, but it's not just here in Indiana and it's not just one political party that's making those statements. We saw state north of us in Michigan, we saw Governor Whitmer make some also pretty offensive comments on a hot mic where she was saying communities come out and oppose data centers and we'll just ram it through anyway, essentially something along those lines of saying we're not going to respect local community sentiment.
Yeah.
We're just going to, and her comment was directed to, I believe an OpenAI, executive who was there for some sort of ribbon cutting for a data center that the community opposed. The community passed an ordinance against, but they only let it through because they were threatened to be sued into oblivion. And so it was this kind of strong arm lawfare tactics by these billionaire, trillionaire companies that are kind of abusing the legal system to force communities to accept infrastructure that they don't want.
Yeah. Yes, sir. We'll keep giving you tax subsidies. Don't worry. So we're going to shift gears just a little bit. This is going to be a little more Ben Inskeep moment, if that's okay.
Okay.
Third Space Indy is sponsored by City Rising. City Rising is a social impact studio. Most recently, they implemented an eviction data dashboard that looks to highlight and reduce the impact of the 30,000 evictions mostly affecting Black and Latino women and their children Indianapolis faces every year. Learn more at cityrising.org. City Rising has sponsored a question, which is, what is a third space to you? Have you ever thought about that?
Yes, because this is a challenge. We have fewer and fewer third spaces that are accessible and free and welcoming for community members to go to. But it makes me all the more appreciative of some of the kind of legacy and options we have. I'm thinking in particular of our public libraries as one of the greatest community resources and third spaces we have. I have some librarians in my family. I got an aunt and uncle who were worked at a library for their career, in a high school library teacher. And thanks to that, I'm aware that they're not just places that anybody in the community can go to, that are welcoming and free places where you don't feel pressured to buy something, and that you can, a Citizens Action Coalition, we can put on events. We've used library meeting places to hold community events, but they also are amazing resources for community members. Librarians have all sorts of knowledge about how to apply for benefits, how to get involved in the community action, how to find information, maybe if you're interested in a specific project or the history. So I would just, when I think of third spaces, that's one of the ones I always think to as just a true treasure of our communities that people just think, oh, that's just a building that has books.
Mhm.
No, these are community spaces that are community resources that are true treasures
Yeah.
and true gems of any community that we need to fully fund and protect, because many of the other types of third spaces and communities are, moving in a different direction, are becoming, more costly to go to, or, maybe don't, or not as accepting of all people from all walks of life like a library would be.
Mhm. Great answer. I think of, in the context of AI and data centers, one of the founding sort of principles of this podcast is that in the post-COVID world, in the world where you don't understand what's real because it's all AI generated, people will have a large backlash towards that to look for more tangible experiences. And places like libraries and other third spaces become more important as we seek out like a consensus of reality, basically.
So true.
Yeah, that's sort of how I think of it at this time, is like when you don't know what's going on, like the only thing you know is true is that I can like hold your hand at this moment. Like, you're a real person, that type of thing.
Isn't that the truth? I noticed that in my personal life, just now gravitating to more of those types of things that I know are real, that are offline, that are tangible. Things just as simple as journaling in a physical journal, or unplugging from the internet and going on a hike in the woods, or I hope, at least with AI, people are gonna, that this backlash becomes a trend where people do seek out more meaningful opportunities that are, they can identify as real, as not artificial, and reclaim some of those benefits that maybe we've forgotten about or gotten out of touch with a little bit. But now that with the AI backlash coming, there's kind of a push in that direction.
Yeah, definitely. Follow up to the previous question. What is a third space or place that has existed for you previously but no longer does?
Well, we were actually just talking before we started recording about just, like a local coffee shop in Lawrence that I used to go to frequently closed down. And so that was an example of just a casual place that you could go to that was, a place outside of my own house that I could go to work or read, or just be in a different environment, meet with people that now no longer exists. We've seen a number of businesses in my community not be sustained and have that falling through. And then it's like, okay, now I got to go farther to get to that type of a place or find something different. So that's an example.
What was the name of that coffee shop?
Oh,
I challenged.
Yeah, now you got me. That's been a minute that I'm forgetting off the top of my head. Porter Brooks and Porter. Yeah, I think it's Porter. But so that was a bummer that we lost that. I'm lucky that I still have, one of the places that I really enjoy is still around is the state park we have here in Indianapolis, the Fort Harrison State Park, which is a treasure to have in our city. That's in my backyard, and that's one that I still get a lot of value from on a weekly basis, having access to. And that's a treasure for our community, having that green space that's low cost, that's right there. Not a lot of people in the country can find an affordable house that backs up to a green place, a green space.
So you were literal backyard.
So it's literally my backyard, which, just speaks to, the benefit of living in a city like Indianapolis, where we can have that access that a lot of people in a lot of cities wouldn't have that type of opportunity.
I've made it my brand identity to go to a place like Benjamin Harrison State Park, or another beautiful green space, take a short recording of it and go, wouldn't a data center look great here? That's my current brand identity, of just being like, look at this beautiful space. Wouldn't it be amazing if there was a warehouse here?
Oh yeah, many people are asking this. Yes.
So every episode, I ask a question from the previous guest. The previous guest from this episode, their name is Clockwork Jans. That's their real name.
Okay.
They asked the question, why are you in a rush?
Why am I in a rush?
Take it how you will.
Ooh. I like the challenge of the question, kind of implying you should slow down, So it's an interesting question. I feel like there is so much happening right now, and there's such high stakes for the communities that we care about that I feel pressure to do a lot and try to be very active in standing up for Hoosiers. And so as a result, sometimes that means I'm rushing about taking on too many challenges in order to try and advocate for so many different causes. So, but I think it's always good to think about, do you need to be in a rush or can you slow down? Because so many times we're putting an artificial constraint that's making us feel rushed. And so I like I like this question because it's suggesting to me that, you can still do a lot, but maybe you don't also need to feel that time pressure. And as a result, make yourself miserable or feel stressed. You can still do a lot without, without him feeling.
Sometimes you just impose like deadlines on yourself that you made up. You know what I mean? You're just like, I have to read this book by Wednesday or else I'll blow up.
Yeah, exactly. So many of those are self-imposed in that when you label it, you think about it expressly as opposed to just kind of accepting it, you maybe can challenge it and realize, you know what, maybe I don't need to feel that way. I can be chill.
I have a couple last questions. I'm going to try to get you in trouble.
Uh-oh. Why would you do that?
That's fun. Do you think, now I'm going all the way back to the beginning of the conversation. Do you think that the original Luddites, as the actions they took in terms of physical action to destroy machines, were justified in their actions, their understandable standpoint?
I can certainly understand why when a government and industry is not responsive to the concerns of the mass public, of people, and the actions they're taking are just further immiserating people, not giving them opportunity, and then shutting down their ability to create a different outcome or different opportunity, then people are going to take those actions into their own hands. It's forget who said it, but somebody more famous than me once said, kind of along the lines of governments that prevent, nonviolent action are basically creating the necessity of violent responses. Mm-hmm. So when you don't allow communities to make their voices heard and have that impact change, what's the only way they can make change is taking on a more extreme action. So we certainly, are not condoning violence or property destruction or anything like that. But I will say, when people don't have the ability to put food on their table, that creates, the need for strong action, right? Like it's, you can't fault somebody for stealing a loaf of bread if they're going hungry, right? It's the kind of quintessential kind of example of and used in ethics. Mm-hmm. So I would just say that, governments and industry needs to be careful about the conditions they're creating, because for every action, there's going to be a reaction. And if they don't want a violent response, they should ensure nonviolent response can be effective in creating the change that people need in order to thrive and survive in their community.
I also know the quote you're talking about. I believe it was a U.S. president.
Okay.
It's something like, those who make nonviolent change impossible make violent change inevitable, or something.
Thank you. That's much more eloquent than my butchering of that phrase.
I do not know the individual who said it, though. Off the top of my head, I do have my laptop in front of me, but I won't deal with it. Yeah. Someone will comment or whatever. 2 last questions. Is there any last thing that you're thinking about that's on your heart, on your mind, on your soul, that you would like to bear in front of the microphone at this time?
I think affordability has become a major challenge for Hoosiers across our state. And we're seeing that on a number of different fronts with the data center issue and concerns about bills rising. But it's also happening just through our traditional utilities and traditional kind of trends outside of the data center issue. So we need to make sure, Hoosiers have access to affordable, essential utility services, whether that's power, whether that's water, whether that's high-speed internet. all these things are becoming more expensive and more difficult for Hoosiers. And so this is kind of one of the bread and butter issues we've been fighting for 52 years at Citizens Action Coalition. We got our start with the first, one of the first energy crises in our country in the 1970s. We're experiencing a lot of similar concerns today with soaring inflation, soaring cost of electricity. So I think that's been on my mind as we see kind of electric utility bills soar. We saw some responsive legislation this session, but it's not going to meaningfully change the trajectory of bills in the future. So it's going to be something that's really important for Hoosiers to make their voices heard on and continue to fight for, because it's so critical, but we have a lot of work to do.
Absolutely. Great answer. One last question. What question, Mr. Inskeep, would you like to ask the next Third Space Indy guest? It's not scheduled, so I don't know. It can be about anything.
I would challenge them to identify what ways they think people can make their neighborhoods better at the very micro local level. What actions have you taken or would you take to just improve our city at the neighborhood level? There's a lot of talk at the statewide level, at the citywide level. I think there's a lot that people can do just within their own little micro communities. So I'd be interested to hear how they would respond to that type of a question.
Totally agree. Great question. Thanks so much for joining me today out here on the coldest day of June.
Yes, a little unseasonably cool, but I'll take it. The heat is not my favorite part of the summer.
So if you would like to be found, you are CAC, where can the people find you? Please share.
Please check out our website. It's citact.org. If you want to follow my spicy Twitter takes, I'm at Ben_Inskeep on Twitter. So look for me there.
And Inskeep is INSKEEP.
That's correct. Yeah. Yep. One N.
Amazing. Thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode of Third Space Indy. You can find me by going to thirdspaceindy.com or by going to Third Space Indy on Instagram. Thanks so much to City Rising for sponsoring the podcast. And as always, thanks so much to the local artist Jennasen for allowing me to use your song, Scared Rabbit, as the intro song. Thanks once again for watching. Thank you, Ben Inskeep, for joining me. Donate to CAC, Citizens Action Coalition, because this is an important cause that we are facing at this time. Have a great rest of the day. Goodbye.
Thanks.